It wasn't teleportation. It was a simple movement. His legs moved forward, step by step, yet it was insanely fast, almost as if his sleek form had become one with space itself. Achilles tried to raise his sword in guard, but Ryuk's sleek, metallic hand clamped down on his face. Running across the battlefield, he leapt into the air. Boom! The ground split open like butter as Achilles' head was driven through it, dragged along in a violent streak. They traveled nearly 100 kilometers in less than a split second before Ryuk flung him upward. Achilles gripped his sword, raising it high into the air, preparing to slash down, only to watch as a metallic leg appeared and crashed into his wide-open chest. Kaboom! A massive shockwave erupted outward, mountain peaks disintegrating into dust as his figure was sent tumbling through them before splintering into a sea of lava and coming to a stop. A low hum was all that left Achilles' lips as he rose to one knee, his sword stabbing into the lava. The peculiar sound reached his ears, and he looked forward, finding Ryuk already running toward him. Ah! He exhaled, a breath of darkness escaping his lips as a pitch-black horn suddenly extended from his forehead. It glowed with a dark light, sending forth lines of cracks across his face, quickly spreading to cover his entire body. His hands tightened on his sword, his body leaning forward, and in the next moment he took a step and cleaved outward. Ryuk's eyes spun like black holes, flashing as he ran forward. Unending streams of data flowed through his mind. 0.1 second. Sword cleaves to the navel. 0.2 second. Phantom behind. Strike. To the left shoulder. 0.3 second. Phantom to the left. Strike. To the neck. 0.5 second. Strike from below. Target. The ankle. 2.1 seconds. Strike from the front. Target the neck. As Achilles stepped forward, shadowy lines of pitch black spun rapidly from beneath his foot, and in an instant, 3 more versions of himself appeared, surrounding Ryuk from behind and both sides. In the next moment, all 4 cleaved their swords. Ryuk's ankle emitted a strange whirring sound as he took a step back and suddenly rolled into the air. Achilles' sword missed his navel, an inch away from grazing his back. A leg smashed down onto Achilles' clone head, as it missed his shoulder and got nailed into the lava instead. Influence change, sword art from the right, target, the shoulder. Another from the side, target, the ribs. Achilles moves, new sword art, massive shadow strike from above. Taking a single step, Ryuk's shoulder shifted just as a cleave swept past. In the same instant, his arm sliced upwards, cleaving through the clone's neck and cutting through like a sharp blade as the end flew into the air, disappearing into the lava. Another sword slipped from the void, stabbing towards his ribs, only to freeze as 2 sleek fingers locked onto it. The sword shattered into fragments, and Ryuk's hand morphed into a drill, tearing straight through the clone's face, leaving a gaping hole. He flung the clone aside, his hand shifting back from drill to palm, then instantly raised both arms above his head. Kaboom! A thunderous shockwave surged outward as a gigantic phantom sword came crashing down on Ryuk. However, it suddenly halted mid-strike as his mechanical arms curved upward, gripping the blade with open palms. Both remained locked in a deadlock while Ryuk was forced down into the lava. The echo of footsteps boomed as Achilles blurred forward with terrifying speed. In the next instant, he became a shadow, appearing before the crouched Ryuk. His sword cleaved down, a moon arc of darkness, slashing toward his neck, but it meant nothing as Ryuk vanished. The falling blade cut through Ryuk's right arm, but it was a shallow graze. Achilles was still stuck in his motion of slashing down when his eyes widened in disbelief as he felt Ryuk's figure looming behind him. How? Those successive strikes he had planned to end Ryuk once and for all, yet his opponent now stood behind him. As he turned, his sword slashed out at his neck, only to meet air again, for Ryuk was already crouched, as if he already expected the move. His fingertips touched Achilles' chest, who paused, and in the next instant, boom! A 1-inch punch. Achilles was thrown backward, flipping 5 times before dragging his sword into the lava to stop himself. The familiar sound of approaching steps echoed again as Achilles thrust his sword forward toward Ryuk. It appeared before him in a deadly strike, only for it to be narrowly dodged once more, as he slipped to the side. Boom! A punch slammed into Achilles' jaw from beneath, lifting him a meter into the air. His teeth clenched hard as he brought his sword down toward Ryuk's head. But then, the sound of bone snapping rang out as a mechanical elbow crashed into his jaw, forcing him to stumble 3 steps back. For the next 5 minutes, only afterimages filled the lava field, phantoms flashing, strikes and counters blurring into chaos. All of them showed a single thing: a knight being battered, overwhelmed, strike after strike. How? How? Those were the only thoughts echoing in Achilles' head as he slashed in fury. Every blow dodged, countered, and rendered useless. Lacerations and cracks covered his shadowed body, yet not a single mark lay upon his opponent. The creature's reaction speed was beyond insane. Achilles had spent centuries perfecting his swordsmanship. His shadow element further makes his strikes unseen and almost impossible to react to. Yet before this being, it was all for nothing. Boom! 3 consecutive strikes landed on Achilles, 2 to the shoulder, 1 to the face, driving him backward once more. He stepped forward, sword clashing down. But it missed, only slicing a strand of Ryuk's hair. His face was grabbed, and again. A powerful shockwave erupted. The molten ground burst into crimson light as dark blood splashed out into the air from Achilles' lips. But that was only the beginning. Jaw, 3rd shoulder bone, 7th rib. All weakness points identified. Initiating barrage mode. Ryuk's arm snapped back, and in the next instant, a relentless storm of punches crashed down on Achilles, each blow striking with blinding speed, forcing him deeper into the ground. Fast. It is too fast to dodge. Forbidden death technique. Shadow of death. Rising upright, a sound came from Ryuk's eyes as his neck rapidly turned to the side. A cold line of data appeared, and in the next moment, he chased after the invisible shadow that burst out of the ground. Achilles turned, only to find Ryuk's punch right before his face. It blasted straight through, yet there was no sound of clashing. The sound of iron clashing against iron resounded as Ryuk dropped down from the air, landing on his feet. His creased eyebrows turned down to his chest, and he found a diagonal mark crossing over it, revealing ever-changing layers of nanomaterial beneath. In the next moment they quickly assembled, and the wound was immediately closed. Turning behind him, he found Achilles, but he was substantially different. For one, he possessed no physical form, having become a full shadow. The shadow didn't immediately race to attack Ryuk. Instead, he paused, his hands gripping his own jaw tightly, forcing it to the side and then to the left, as if to it was real. Only then did he turn to look at Ryuk. "We have underestimated you," Achilles admitted. Though all the Nulls knew Thaythvorgith had birthed a son, with rumors of him even being alive, the truly powerful Nulls in command didn't really care about it. He was just a kid who had only managed to escape with his heart and lungs. How far can a person with just a heart and lungs go? Of course, it was nowhere. They had only started focusing on him after hearing of the death of Zarkul. But Zarkul himself was a weakling among the calamities. The weakest of them. He garnered attention but wasn't a threat to focus on. Yet now he was back with 2 calamities having fallen by his hands. They had underestimated him, grossly so. Still, we Nulls prevailed even back then, when Thaythvorgith turned his blood scythe against us. "Compared to him, you're nothing," Achilles said, only to watch as Ryuk raised his hands, his palms rumbling with destructive energy. "As much as I hate to praise Thaythvorgith, I'm pretty sure when you Nulls tried to take him down, a Null like you was probably quivering in fear behind a rock," he said, watching as Achilles' shadow visibly rippled. The resulting reaction made him smile. "So I'm right, huh? You Space was scorched into nothingness as a powerful wave of destructive energy erupted forth from Ryuk's palm, smashing into Achilles. A pillar was blasted through his shadowy stomach, but a glint flashed in Ryuk's eyes as he watched shadows cover the hole. Even energy can't get to him. This might be troublesome. In the next moment, Achilles moved, and Ryuk took a step backward. The sword slashing by his chest missed by an inch, unable to meet their target, and Ryuk reacted instantly, his legs slamming through Achilles' head, but met with nothing. A thunderous explosion resounded as Ryuk was blasted far away, flying for almost 20 kilometers before coming to a stop. Looking at his chest, there was a diagonal cut upon it, radiating thick amounts of corrosion. His nanomaterial rapidly pieced together, but this time its regeneration speed was more than halved. Turning forward, he found Achilles hovering toward him. "Before you mock me for cowardice, remember, your father was the biggest failure we Nulls ever had." He spat out, his shadow spreading out from him all over the place, and soon enough, everything was reduced to pitch black. A pitch black so terrifying that when Ryuk raised his own hands to his face, he couldn't see anything at all. Even feeling was seemingly deprived of him in that moment, as he felt his control over his body slipping away, almost as if his senses over them were darkening. "Interesting," he muttered, his voice ringing loud and clear through the space. "Unlike your father, you're weaker, and you will die," the voice said, and in the next moment, feeling returned to Ryuk. The feeling of his arm, and in the next moment, he turned to where it ought to be, only to hear the sound of something dropping to the ground. "My arm! It's been cleaved off." He took a step, flashing away from where he was. The sound of another cleave rang out, followed by the thump of it hitting the ground. "The darkness you see is unlike anything you have ever seen, for the darker your soul, the clearer you can see within it." The voice echoed out from everywhere, making Achilles' position hard to narrow down. "Unlike your father, you have not been exposed to enough darkness. You have light in your soul, and that will be the death of you." Another sound of slicing rang out, and Ryuk wobbled on his feet, but only for a moment before his other leg was cleaved off and he fell on his butt. With no arms and no legs, the battle seemed to be over. He raised his head upward. He saw nothing, yet he felt something within the darkness, seemingly calling to me. "You fought well for one who started with only a heart and a lung. Hence, I'll give you the honor of leaving your last words." The words rang out as Achilles watched Ryuk's head hang low, as if in thought. Then his head raised up, his lips moving. "You're pathetic," he said in mockery. The shadow sword instantly cleaved down straight towards Ryuk, intending to cleave him into two. In response, all Ryuk did was darkly chuckle. Just as the sword was an inch from his brows, a pitch-dark vortex suddenly tore open in its path, and the blade vanished into it. The sound of a heavy collision rang out as Achilles felt something smash straight into the back of his neck, sending him flying forward. His eyes widened when he found himself being sent flying toward the sitting Ryuk. Both their eyes locked, and this time, Ryuk's eyes looked directly into his, something that should have been impossible in the blindness. "So pathetic." Blood burst out of Achilles' lips, raining down upon Ryuk's face. He slowly turned his gaze away from his sword to look at his own chest, and there it was. The enormous sword had pierced exactly through his chest, skewering even his heart, and a void vortex could be seen, responsible for directing the sword through him. How? "You should have never be see," he said, collapsing to one knee before Ryuk. "Even though you morphed yourself into a true shadow, making all attacks, physical or energy, phase through you since technically you're a shadow. Your own weapon was kept solid so you could attack me," Ryuk said, grinning with mockery. "And talking of me being blind, of course I can't see. But have you forgotten that within you is something of mine?" he asked, watching as Achilles' eyes widened in realization. "You might not know, but my parts call to me, even in the deepest darkness. They're roaring to break free and return to me. That makes your position as clear as daylight. Your shadow domain is almost invincible. A crippling darkness that swallows in a body where nothing physical, no matter how powerful, could touch. You could finish off even the most powerful opponents in seconds. But you faced the one who gave you that power in the first place. He whispered, knowingly, and in the next moment, the darkness dispersed and Achilles collapsed onto his belly. Ryuk's own severed arms and legs immediately came flying back, merging with him as he rose to his feet. Achilles' body morphed back to physical form, but with his heart gone and his chest skewered through, he was deader than dead. Along with his death, his remaining army also dispersed into the shadows. Ryuk looked at the body, and it occurred to him, this was the fourth calamity, Achilles, the one who controlled shadows. The only thing of his that could be controlled by Ryuk was his circulatory system. While Ryuk might have his heart, he had no veins. He had relied on that of Uncle Bob to cultivate, and this calamity was the one who possessed his arteries and veins. As if to confirm Ryuk's words, he watched as Achilles faded into shadows that dissolved into the air, leaving just one thing behind, a ball of pitch-dark liquid. Ryuk bent down, picked it up, and looked at it. Within this patch of black blood were tiny strands, and the sight of them brought a small smirk to his face. In the next moment, the ball of liquid faded away. A deep exhale left Ryuk's lips. He felt weak and weary in both body and soul. Two powerful calamities in a row, and he was greatly exhausted. Yet, before he could try to quell his exhaustion, the Nullic sky was crushed asunder as Ryuk jerked his head upward. The scene was that of glass shattering into pieces, and from within the depths, something crawled out. An abomination of the highest order. Ryuk looked up at it, and his eyes widened to their max. It was the gigantic silhouette of a head with a single piercing crimson eye on its forehead, locking directly upon Ryuk. Its face was like glass with only the eye intact, and yet, the aura from that eye. A petrifyingly dark aura, the most evil Ryuk had ever come across. The world under the effect of that aura felt different. Ryuk turned to the far end, and there he saw the Nulls, but they were unmoving. They hung in space in whatever action they were previously in. He turned to the left and the same was true. All of the Nulls there also hung in space, unmoving. The world had fallen silent, and time itself had been paused, a feat even the current Ryuk could never achieve. And all of this had happened from the mere presence of the being above him. Ryuk. Null. The word came out almost like a sigh as Ryuk slowly hovered off the ground, ascending into the air. But it wasn't by his will. The control of his own body had been shut down, unable to muster any resistance against the sudden force that descended upon him and was now lifting him. But then, Ryuk felt the deeper source. It wasn't that he couldn't move his body. Rather, it felt as if his connection to it had been severed. Almost as if whatever had attacked him had gone into the deepest part of his soul and severed the chain that bonded both body and soul together. Magnam cladum inter tuas ipsi seruisti. You have sown great destruction amongst your own people. The voice echoed out, and it never occurred to Ryuk that it was different at all. Instead, he was caught in the scene of the Nullic sky being further torn apart. A gigantic hand, hundreds of thousands of times bigger than he was, pressed out of the space, reaching for him. Hoc statim desinere opertet. This must stop at once. The voice spoke again. When the hands reached a kilometer away from grabbing Ryuk. Boom! An incredibly thunderous explosion resounded, cracks spreading through one of the 3 fingers the hand possessed. Ryuk was forcefully blasted away, slamming into the ground and opening an abyss. But the world was only silent for a moment before a lacerated single hand appeared out of the abyss. It was none other than Ryuk, crouched on both feet. His left hand was gone, and his entire nanobody was covered in cracks that refused to heal. Ryuk couldn't remain on his legs, hence collapsed onto one knee in the next moment, his eyes dimming in pain as dark blood freely flowed out from them. Partem anime tui iam imperfecti detonasti ut solem imperium effugers? You detonated a part of your incomplete soul just to escape control? The words echoed out as Ryuk forced his head up toward the eye, and his lips moved. "What is your name?" he asked, as the eye stared silently at his figure for a long while before responding. "Null." The answer made Ryuk pause for a moment, his eyes flashing in disbelief even as blood poured from them. "No wonder," he mused to himself, before forcing himself up to his feet. Turning to the figure, his words echoed out loud, heard only by both. "I promise to end you soon," he said, as the figure's hand immediately began moving again, stretching toward Ryuk. It was so big there was nowhere to run, and the voice followed. "Voluntas tua vindictiva clarior est quam patris tuae." Your will for revenge burns far brighter than that of your father. "Periculosum est nunc te perdam." It is dangerous. Now I will destroy you, it said as it grabbed at Ryuk, who rose to both feet, taunting. "I'd like to see you try." The enormous hand was incredibly fast, just inches from Ryuk's face in an instant, but then it suddenly recoiled away. It was too late. Kaboom! A massive detonation ravaged the Nullic domain, with Ryuk self-destructing right before the massive hands touched him. Null's body flinched back, but couldn't escape the force. The energy smashed straight through the arm, releasing enough power to blow apart the two remaining fingers. It then contoured rapidly up to the figure in the sky, devouring the entire arm whole. When everything quelled, Ryuk was no more, and so was the gigantic arm that had reached for him. He blew himself up? Null said out loud in shock. But then it remembered that smirk on Ryuk's face as he detonated himself. Those weren't the smirk of someone who planned on dragging another into hell, nor the smirk of someone who had chosen to die. They were filled with mockery. His singular eye watched as his right arm was reduced to nothing, and a vein tore out upon Null's face. He had managed to hurt him. Him? Null? Inveni eum. Find him. The thick growl didn't just echo through the Nullic domain. It amplified across the entire Conqueror domain, heavy with anger. Inveni eum. Ka ryuk null vocator. Find him. The one called ryuk null. Inveni eum et reduce. Mortuum vel vivum. Find him and bring him back, dead or alive. On an island where not a single soul could be found within 100-mile distance, there was an unending range of mountains. Some were half destroyed, some whole. A world of nothing but stones and thick hailstorms. Yet in one of these mountains was a crack. Looking further in, one would find beings in blue techno armor, all standing in a circular formation. Their blue, flaming eyes remained fixed on one thing, a glass tube that stood in the center of the lineup. Within this tube was blood, stale, still blood, and all of a sudden that blood began to move. The tube rolled and rolled on the ground, shaking apart until cracks spidered across its surface. It shattered into pieces. The blood rolled up into the sky, quickly expanding before congealing, first forming a maw that widened rapidly. What followed was a deep, haunting laughter, rippling with intense mockery. Hey hey hey, idiots! The maw was followed by the rest of the body, and soon enough, a figure sat on the ground, surrounded by the armored beings. Ah! A deep exhale, one filled with satisfaction, left Ryuk's lips as his closed eye flittered open, sending forth a weak ray of light through the room. He turned his head up, finding his Nexus Legion all around him. So, this was why you left the blood behind. You really were planning to just go die in that realm. The system panel flashed as a smirk appeared on Ryuk's face. The truth was, while he had headed for the Nulls immediately, he had paused during his journey after finding this desolate place. An idea had occurred to him. He would leave a vial of his blood within a test tube and have his Nexus Legion secretly watch over it. Even if he were forced to death within the Null domain, with this much blood well protected, he would be able to bring himself back to life. Truly, the plan had worked splendidly. Here he was once more, still kicking. That bastard! Ryuk snickered coyly as he remembered the one who had called himself Null. That entity was powerful, far, far more powerful than him. He had stopped time itself. How could his already exhausted self face such a being? In the end, he had done what he could. Taunt him to come closer, just to explode close to him. While such an explosion could never be enough to take down such a being, it would at least wipe off that supremacy expression of his. And truly, it had done so, as Ryuk could hear the roar of rage to search for him before his consciousness dispersed. "So you detonated yourself just to troll him?" the system asked as he snickered. "Sounds ridiculous, but it was oddly satisfying. You can't keep detonating yourself." The system panel blinked before him. "If you detonate, you need energy to take yourself back to normal. The last time you detonated, you had that angelic being's essence and you absorbed it to bring yourself back. But now, what do you have to absorb? You're currently weaker than even an eternity stage expert." Ryuk leaned forward to look at himself. While he indeed occupied a physical body, he was weak, terribly weak. His ability to regenerate from a single cell was not supreme. He would still need an energy source close by to return to his true state. But he wasn't worried at all. "I so have an energy source," he muttered to himself. In the next moment, 3 objects appeared in the air. A bone, an orb of blood, and a headless muscular torso. Each of these objects rippled with an amount of energy far greater than the angelic essence Ryuk had used the last time. "I got them, 3 of my original body parts all at once," Ryuk said with the biggest smile on his face. This was exactly why he had run away without shame. He'd recovered 3 of his body parts. If he had remained defiant and fought Null, he would have lost, already exhausted, and Null would have taken those 3 items away from him in one way or another. But now he had them. After this, there were just 3 more he needed to fetch. "Before I fight Null, I will hunt them down, those 3 remaining Null calamities. They weren't in the Null domain. Most likely they were out invading some planet. I will find them and rip out what they stole. And when I'm fully complete, I'll then face Null and force out the truth from him." In the next moment, a white rift appeared, and his Nexus legions disappeared into it. When it left Ryuk alone, his hands lifted and opened another rift. Inside it, a garden of red roses and blue lilies could be seen. He stepped inside completely, fading away from the world. For now, he had chosen to retreat. But the next time he stepped out, he would drag a bigger hell down upon this realm. Just published a new book, titled Mecha Devourer System. "You look pale, you okay?" The voice rang out a second after Ryuk stepped in. His drooping eyes turned to the side, and there she was, Zafir, a rose stalk between her lips as she gave him a single-eyed look, her tone dripping with teasing amusement. "TCH. He clicked his tongue, glancing at the octopus just chilling in the beautiful garden. Should have brought her ass out and let it get burned in abyssal energy, he thought, glaring at her. "I'm fine. Thank you for your care," he said, earning a light chuckle from Zafir. Ryuk turned and quickly noticed it. The garden, it was snowing. He looked up and found snowflakes raining down. The source of it all was just beside the great tree in the garden, a large, crystallized, egg-like cocoon. What was more, the red roses and blue lilies within a kilometer distance had turned snow-white. Isha had yet to finish her evolution. "Annoying, isn't it?" The voice came again by his ear. Ryuk turned, raising an eyebrow at Zafir, who was looking up at the falling flakes. "You're not a fan of cold?" he asked, watching her roll her eyes. "Who is a fan of cold?" "I am," Ryuk said. Frost gathered in his palm, forming a massive snowflake that burst right on top of Zafir's nose. "Tisk." She clicked her tongue, wiping the frost from her face before looking back at him. "Have you reached there yet?" It occurred to Ryuk then that he had told Zafir to remain here until they reached the upper realm. But he'd already reached it and hadn't told her. "Yes, we have. We're in the Conqueror realm right now," she said. A glint crossed her eyes, something Ryuk immediately noticed. "Have something you plan on doing?" he asked, watching her blink with a mix of reluctance and intent. Then she turned and said, You seem to want to do something in here. Yes, I do. It might take some time too, he replied, watching her nod. Okay then. Once you're done with whatever you plan, there's somewhere I want to visit. I can bring you too if you promise not to be an annoying brat, she added, and he rolled his eyes. Okay. And you're the annoying brat. Ryuk continued deeper into the garden as Zafir wrapped herself in her tentacles again. Staying in a single place like this should have bored her, but there was something about the garden, something that erased that feeling completely. In a way, she even felt reluctant to leave. Besides, ever since she arrived here, her cultivation speed had advanced continuously, and what's more, the visions. This place was paradise, and the last thing she wanted to do was to leave. But there was also something that continuously pulled at her heart. She had to leave soon. Just what is he up to now? Zafir mused, watching Ryuk walk farther and farther until he disappeared completely. If he's trying to walk to the end of the garden, then he'll be spending quite a long while, she muttered, snickering to herself knowingly. I think here's good enough, Ryuk muttered to himself. He didn't know whether fusing with his parts would make him release destructive energy like his last evolution had, so he had decided to stay away from Isha and Zafir as much as possible. With enough distance, his mouth shifted into a wide maw, and the musculature of Azragoth reappeared only to be devoured whole by him. His heart pounded heavily the moment he devoured the body, but it didn't end there. Opening his maw once more, he threw the orb of blood in. His heartbeat pounded wildly this time, each pulse sending forth waves of energy. Grabbing the last object, the spine with the thread, he devoured that too. As it entered him, Ryuk felt his consciousness slipping away rapidly. He sat down, but even that didn't help. His eyes blurred, and in the end he had to lie flat on his back. The pink skies above did wonders to calm his breath, along with the soft touch of lilies surrounding him. Soon enough he drifted into sleep. Moments later, a single ray of light suddenly burst out of him, then another and another. Soon Ryuk could be seen, the real him. The light rays scorched away his nanobody. If one were to pass by, they wouldn't find Ryuk but a skeletal figure buried within roses. His heart was there, beating beneath his ribs, and that was when it moved. The orb of blood came closer and closer. The sound was like a hot ball tossed into ice. The orb buried itself into Ryuk's own beating heart, and immediately, the sound of his heartbeat changed. It beat deeper, a rhythm that felt more alive. Next came the spine-like object hovering above him like it possessed a will of its own. It drifted down and attached itself to the bone at the back of Ryuk's neck. Rippling, its threads spread out, elongating across his spine and to various parts of his skeletal system, binding the already firm bones even tighter. Then came the muscular body he had devoured. It had been reduced to bits upon swallowing, but what it became was a sludge, a semi-solid metallic sludge that dripped over his bones. With his heart pounding against it, it began to pump something new. Strands rapidly extended over the metal sludge, and soon, an unbelievable transformation began. A new rebirth. These were the physical changes to him, but the rebirth was not limited to his body. Ryuk opened his eyes, but the pink skies didn't welcome him. He sat up and he paused, seeing he was standing between two groups. This was his soul space, and turning forward, Ryuk found them. You're both finally here. They were a familiar sight. Two beings no different from Ryuk's own looks, yet equally different. One had crimson-red hair, covered in crimson-dark scales, while the other was covered in blue scales all over, with sharp draconic claws. They were his two previous bloodlines, and now they were back, just as they promised. So much power, the Nullik Ryuk muttered as he opened and closed his claws. You fused with 3 of your body parts at once, hence bolstering our power massively. Is it that you have forgotten our existence? Or are you just confident you could take us on? The Draconic Ryuk asked, watching Ryuk rise to his feet with a careless shrug. The former is actually right. I actually forgot you both would return after the fusion, Ryuk said. watching them pause their gaze at his figure. But the latter too is right, even if I didn't consider it. The second those words were voiced, steps rang out behind him, and it wasn't just one but three people that actually stepped forward. They were his bloodline manifestations. His Beyonder bloodline manifestation, and he was taken by surprise upon seeing that there were three. There was only supposed to be one, that proud white-haired girl, but now there were two more girls. One had a full head of orange hair, while the other's hair changed color every second. That was when it occurred to him. The last time he had come here, he had seen 6 thrones, and the bloodline manifestation had told him they correlated to all 6 sigils. After his evolution, he had awakened 2 more sigils, and these must be them. Right now, they had been triggered by the existence of 2 more foreign presences, and their gazes collided hard with Nullik and Draconic. "They're nothing," Nullik claimed, the void beneath his feet cracking into pieces as he prepared to move. But a hand suddenly grabbed his shoulder, making him pause in his steps. "We're outnumbered 3-2, and they're just as powerful," Draconic said to Null, though his gaze was upon Ryuk. "If we fight, we may win, or we may lose, but whatever the result, you'll end up taking the biggest damage, Ryuk. Your body parts will never reach their true capability without us to awaken the dormant power within them. And while we're outnumbered, Nullik and I can take down at least one of them, which will also cripple whatever success you have with these new bloodlines of yours." As much as he hated to admit, Draconic's words were true. He had made a mistake, fusing with 3 parts at once, hence making Nullik and Draconic stronger than ever before. While he had no doubt his Beyonder dragon manifestations would still win in a fight, they would still take damage, and possibly 1 or even 2 of them might die. Even though he had already fused with his skeletal system, he had lost all its power when Nullik and Draconic disappeared the last time. Without them, his body parts were just body parts. Their true power would never be awakened in their absence, and that was a big waste of potential. "So now you're trying to offer a truce, he said with a humorous expression. "I believe that is what is best, and you know that," Draconic said, and Ryuk's expression contorted. "You're not the one to talk to me about what is best. You knew what was best the last time, and you fought anyway, leaving your scary threat behind. Yet here you are, begging for a truce." "I am not begging for it," Draconic said, veins streaking over his face. "Then fight it is. Come forward and die." Ryuk spat out, though none moved. The pressure in the soul space reached an all-time high, with some of the stars far in the void having their lights go off. A breath left Ryuk's lips as he tried to calm his anger. What came out next was a whisper. "Ever since I have known you both, I've always seen it in your eyes. That firm belief that without you, I would be nothing. You always said that I was just lucky to be the son of Thaith Vorgoth, the so-called Null of Carnage, and the daughter of Velzaraka, a mighty jade dragon princess." Ryuk's fist clenched hard in anger. "I destroyed you both to prove you wrong. I wanted to prove that even without both of you, I, along with my incomplete soul and my will, am enough to be something worth looking at. I risked everything for that, and now, I have succeeded." He relaxed his clenched fist. "The calamities I destroyed, I could see it in their eyes, that disbelief, knowing I defeated them without using the so-called lucky power that I was born with. And by the devil, I have never felt greater satisfaction than that moment." He mused, slowly turning to them, raising his voice. "If my body's potential must fade away, then so be it, but I will never go back to the past where I'm looked down upon. If your truce tries to place you above me or the Beyonder dragon manifestation, then to hell with it. I'll risk becoming weaker and fight my way back up to be greater again. I've done it once, I can do it again." His stance was beyond clear, not only to Draconic but even to Nullik, and more than that, they now understood what started it all. They had truly believed he was lucky, and truly he was, but that same truth had created conceit within them. They saw him as nothing more than a fortunate one and firmly believed that without them, he would be nothing. Yet here he was, having destroyed a total of 3 calamities even after he had done away with them. If he were only lucky to have them, Then how did he obtain the body parts from those calamities and win without their help? Were they the ones who were simply supreme, or was he the better? But this wasn't just a fight of who was right or wrong. It was one of those who would agree on what was right or wrong. Just published a new book titled Mecha Devourer System. In the end, they surrendered. Nullik took his step back and rose upright. The same for Draconic. The inherent reflex of a bloodline manifestation was to remain bonded to a host. Not only had Ryuk proven himself capable of surviving without them, but he had also clearly revealed that their absence did not signify weakness. Instead, it would only serve to further his power. This improved his appeal factor many times over, and now it was their own wish to stay. Even if he agrees to let you stay, our decision is the true finality. The words echoed out as Ryuk turned to find the one who had spoken. It was the lady with the ever-changing color of hair, part of his Beyonder Dragon bloodline. And we decide that you both leave, the one with the orange hair said, leading to Draconic and Nullik creasing their brows. You both are of lower bloodline hierarchy anyway. With or without you, he will become what he needs to be, and with us, he will be more powerful than he will ever be if he fuses with you at all. That single word was like a blade that instantly cut through her speech, making the orange-haired bloodline manifestation pause in her tracks. I get to decide who stays and who leaves, not you, he said, looking right into her soul before turning to the other. Neither is it you. You are what you are, manifestations. You do not control me, nor is your decision final. I want them to stay. They stay. That is final. A scoff followed, and it came from the ever-changing colored one. We have only just met for the first time, but the image I have of you is already sour. Thankfully, it is not compulsory for the manifestations and the holders to be on good terms. I don't want their lower presence around me, and that is my decision, she said, giving a disdainful eye glance at Nullik and Draconic. And not only are they outnumbered, you can't stop us from fighting, the other added, making Ryuk raise an eyebrow at both of them. Outnumbered? He asked, turning to the last girl. It was the white-haired one, the original bloodline manifestation. Under the widened eyes of the two others, they watched as she stepped back, standing beside Ryuk. His decision is my decision. Her words shocked the two. You decided to side with him, Flamiel? You really want these inferiors to stay? They called out in disbelief, but her expression didn't waver in the least. His decision is my decision, she repeated, her tone firm. Why would she ever doubt him? She had been there since the beginning. While at first she had disdained and was very cautious of Ryuk because he had so easily betrayed his own original bloodlines, she had eventually seen more of him, his courage and integrity, and that had changed everything she had ever known. He deserved her presence and was worthy enough to be the only heir to the Beyonder Dragon bloodline. This was her final judgment. Whether now or in the future, whether against 1,000 bloodline manifestations, even if it meant her elimination, his decision would always be her decision. Turning away from the other two, she looked at Ryuk, noticing the glint in his eyes as he looked at the manifestations. She pressed her hand against his shoulder, stopping their buildup. They only manifested recently and are just like me when I first bonded with you, she said, pausing the idea forming in his heart. With time, just like me, they'll come to understand. Destroying them now won't give you much. Destroy us? The one with the different colors snapped, her expression one of disbelief before scoffing mockingly. You're not close to my level of power, Flamiel, and neither are these two inferiors. I alone can destroy you three. Her tone carried absolute confidence, causing a slight crease in Flamiel's eyes. Truly, the third sigil held great power, but her crease only lasted a second before her face settled. If he wants you destroyed, you'll be destroyed. It might not be now, but soon you'll be destroyed, and there'll be nothing that can save you from it. She spoke with such confidence that it made the other pause in her steps. Besides, your pride was what destroyed us all the last time. Perhaps it's time you take control of it and recognize your position. What position? She shot back, her eyes turning colorless. We're manifestations, not holders. We support, and that's all we do, all we're created to do. Your recklessness brought us to our end in the last epoch, and here you are about to repeat the same thing. You should be happy that the other three are yet to awake. If Forza and Endios were awake, they would destroy you immediately. Flamiel spat out in anger, and Ryuk's eyebrows creased. He had no idea what they were referring to, but whatever it was, he noticed the confident smirk on the colored girl's face fade away. In its place came seriousness. In the end, she walked away, stopping for a moment beside Flamiel and whispering into her ear. Forza or Endios, I am Acheron, Acheron the ever-changing. Remember that. She continued toward the thrones, and somehow it was the one right at the center of all six. As she sat down, her eyes slipped shut, and she fell into a silent slumber. With her having backed off and Flamiel by his side, the only one remaining was the orange-haired girl, and she too stepped back in the end, returning to her throne. Who? Flamiel exhaled slightly in relief. Those two were stubborn, especially Acheron. And what was truly scary wasn't just that they were stubborn. They also had enough power to back it up. You can bring back your thrones, Ryuk said, turning to both Nullik and Draconic, who hummed silently. In the next moment, both raised their hands, and the sky above the soul space parted. It wasn't just a throne that descended. It was an entire realm upon itself, slipping down right from the sky and fundamentally altering Ryuk's soul space. It was a throne room that held not one but thrones. One of them was crimson red, and the other was jade blue, seemingly made from the purest of crystals. What was more was the ground. From the crimson red throne, red liquid like blood spilled over its steps, while the other throne spilled forth blue liquid. Both were by each other's side, and they poured down freely onto a pool that was at the center of this throne room. It was greatly unlike what Ryuk had witnessed the realm become the last time. Nullik moved upon his throne and sat, a powerful red-crimson tsunami of energy flaring out from him. His body grew larger, and his horns elongated and sharpened, with two extending from each side of his head. His scales gained more realness to them, making him look like he had been granted a true body, and he seemed closer to a truly devilish being than anything. Draconic moved to his own side of the throne, runic lines trailing over his blue scales, only to have cracks splinter off of him as the former scales were shed away. What came out from beneath wasn't just a scale, but pure jade of ocean blue, his form turning even sleeker and more regal. The power wave that they both oozed out was spine-tingling, and the sight of it made even the Beyonder dragons at the far side open their eyes. Their power wave right now fully matched theirs, and in a way, their throne realm took more of Ryuk's throne room than their realm did, the clearest sign of them possessing more concentration of Ryuk's entire soul space. They have unleashed his true potential, handing all the power to him. Flamiel muttered beneath her lips as she looked at both Draconic and Nullik. This new power of theirs, she knew the source. It was the boon gained when manifestations like them decided to give their holders full control. Such a thing is rare, as it grants the holder full control of their bloodline, making them absolute and even beyond the manifestations. If he wanted, he could snap his fingers and both bloodline manifestations would cease to exist eternally. Ryuk wasn't aware of all of this. While the realm was truly different this time, his thought was that this was only happening due to how many body parts he had fused with. The pool where both Draconic and Nullik essence gathered drew him, and without a word, he stepped down the steps, descending further into it. The liquid continued to rise, Nullik and Draconic essence mixing perfectly within the pool with Ryuk within it, and soon enough, he was completely drowned in the liquid, lying on his back within the depths of the pool. His eyes slowly shut, and when next he opened them, he was welcomed by pink skies. But it wasn't just pink skies. In a way, the world seemed different. In the air, there were motes of various beastly aura moving around in the skies, painting the pink sky in an unnatural beauty. The world was so clear that it felt like seeing it in an improved quality. Strength returned to his body, his fingers twitching, and in the next moment, he pushed himself up, sitting. He raised his hands to his face, and his skin was jade-like glass. His hands weren't hands, but claws, not over-gigantic like when he shifts into draconic form, just more sleek and more angular instead of straight. And this was how his entire body continued, the same jade-like glass, and even though invisible, there were runic dark lines that surged beneath these glassy surfaces. With a thought, his jade-blue skin turned pitch black, radiating a deathly aura, and his claws widened, not beastly but devilish. He could see blue lines now receding behind the dark, scaly skin. With another thought, the darkness receded, and the blue jade light took over again, the black line going beneath. Interesting, he thought to himself, and the panel flashed. It truly is. This isn't some nanobody anymore. It is your real living flesh, it said, as Ryuk rose himself up. He had grown taller once more, 7 meters in height, looking more like a mini-titan. A sleek mini-titan transformed at will, his body growing larger as muscles tore through his frame. He became massive, resembling a bodybuilder, yet retained a devilish appearance with his pitch-dark skin and sharp claws. This was his Nullic form, more muscular and brutish. With a thought, his form lessened, turning sleeker and more refined. This was his draconic form. It's incredible. They shift into each so seamlessly and with just a thought. He mused to himself, his words ringing clearer than anything. He didn't know if it was his voice that had just gotten better or if it was his hearing. But right now he was naked, something Ryuk was more or less used to. But his face changed massively when he looked and found something that broke his dignified expression. What the? Yes, you grew a coochie too. The real deal. For real? Ryuk said, his hands crossing over both legs as he looked around the realm. But there was none around, making him rise upright. Don't be shy. Give it a tap, the system said as Ryuk clicked his tongue. Shut up. He shot back, a couple of clothes appearing in the next moment. It was a long-sleeved, vertical-buttoned shirt with matching trousers, a blue runic symbol over their surface. Wearing them, he paused for a while, raising an eyebrow, and in the next moment, something appeared in his hands. A long coat of blue. This one matches well and has quite an interesting ability, the system panel said, as Ryuk hummed before shrugging it off and draping the coat over his shoulder. Congratulations on the successful fusion. You're now closer than ever to the real you. Thank you. You've also awakened new and enhanced versions of your former draconic and nullic abilities, including those you never even had the chance to use before. The system panel blinked to Ryuk, and he understood. Truly, there were skills he had awakened before he abandoned his bloodlines. Skyvein Lattice, Pale Womb of Embers, Nemery, and Heir of Nitherion. Those skills were powerful, some of them beyond even his imagination, and Ryuk never got a chance ever try them out. But now they were all back, and he didn't even need to read the descriptions or even see them at all. He could faintly feel them, the capability he was capable of, like how one senses their hands can push against something. He felt he could unleash the skills that brought an even clearer increase in growth. It's nice to have them all back. He mused silently to himself before turning forward and looking into the far distance. Even though he had moved very far away before his fusion to avoid hurting Isha and Zafri with the explosion of energy if it ever happened, right now, his eyes were able to see clearly. In fact, he saw the entire realm with a gaze, and it wasn't a zoom onto a particular area, but like an overseer type of sight. And in this sight, he naturally found both Isha and Zafri, and when he saw what they both were up to, it was quite surprising. You really can create living ice golems. You've made a dozen already. Zafri's high-pitched voice could be heard ringing through the garden, and right now, snow had covered the majority of the part they were in. Zafri's hair was matted in snow, and she was on both knees, eyes looking at the creatures at the side. They were humanoid, but short, below a meter tall, and they were white, seemingly made from the purest of ice. Where their eyes were was burning frosty white light as they moved around, spraying the snow over Zafri, who giggled loudly. Before Zafri was Isha, in her humanoid form, but her aura had become even more refined, looking like a true beauty at the peak of her blooming years. She remained kneeling on the ground, too, her hands rolling in the air and conjuring forth ice that birthed out the frost golems, a new ability of hers. "Can you make ones that look like krakens?" Zafri asked excitedly as Isha conjured the 14th golem, pausing her finger. "Kraken?" she asked, and Zafri nodded. "Yes, like this," she said, and in the next moment, Isha watched her change. Though her torso remained, everything beneath her waist became tentacles, a total of 8 covered in purple. "You're a kraken?" Isha said wide-eyed as Zafri chuckled. "Yes, a Zafri kraken to be exact." "Amazing. But I'm not sure I can create golems like that, though." "What do the tentacles do?" Isha asked, as her hand reached out, frost conjuring. "They're like arms without the bones. They can be straightened, though, used to grab something just like hands, but better," she said, and Isha hummed. In the next moment, the frost conjured into a cocoon, and soon it cracked. Something appeared from within, a 1-meter-tall frost golem that looked like a mini version of Zafri herself. Her eyes widened to saucers upon the sight of the golem, which turned to her, its eyes flaming with silvery white. It paused upon the sight of Zafri before jumping into her arms. "So cutie-ie," she screamed out in shock, grabbing the kraken golem by its hands and flinging it high into the air before catching it back like a child. "I'm glad you like it," Isha said, and within 10 seconds, there were 8 more of these krakens all around Zafri, and all gathered over her, soon burying her within the snow gathered on the ground. The sight made Isha laugh, an infectious laughter. It transferred to Zafri, and soon warm laughter filled the garden, only to stop as Isha paused and her eyes darted to the side. Zafri noticed, and she paused, turning to look, and there it was, a being that she couldn't recognize. Luscious snow-white hair surrounded by blue motes of light and a face crafted from perfection. He was dead gorgeous, almost beyond this world. What captivated her the most were those eyes. Eyes of blue with crimson dots like stars within them. But the 2 horns from either side of his head rising into the air woke her up, making her heart unconsciously pound louder. The sight of those 2 simple horns evoked a sense of danger, more striking than the captivating aura of his star-like eyes, prompting her into a state of caution. Her tentacles transformed, their ends reduced to sharpened blades. "Who are?" she was still saying when the frost around her blew backward, sending her purple hair flying and momentarily blinding her. When she turned, she found Isha buried within the figure's embrace. Only then did the realization hit her. There was only one person that the being could be. Ryuk. "But finally finished your evolution," Ryuk said, looking at Isha. Once more, she had grown up, and her skin was even colder, something Ryuk enjoyed. "Hey, you'll slip into me again," he called out as Isha opened her eyes, finding herself halfway into Ryuk, and she tore herself out, giggling coquettishly. "You've changed so much," she said, dragging his face down to her. And she gave his face a thorough analyzing look before sneaking in a quick kiss on the side of his cheek. "Hey!" he screamed as she giggled evilly, running away before he could grab her. "Tchuic twerp," he mused under his breath before he turned away, finding Zafri looking at him with furrowed eyes, surveying him. But then, her eyes soon turned dreamy as she was sucked into those captivating eyes, only waking up when Ryuk waved his hand before her face. "You're finally done." "Humph. Took enough time. You sound like you've been waiting for a 1,000-years-old thing. Just published a new book, titled Mecha Devourer System." "I'm not an old thing," Zafir responded with a pout, and Ryuk snickered but didn't tease further. "So, ready to go where you want to?" he said, a door leading out of the realm appearing before them. "Wait," Zafir said as Ryuk turned to her. "You said you had 2. "I've only seen Isha," she said. "Oh, you mean Void?" he said, his brows furrowing before he shrugged it off. "That lecherous bastard is probably snoring within the embrace of some bosom right now." he thought before saying to Zafir. Void isn't here right now. Well, where is he? Zafir asked, and Isha responded from the side. In the Void Beast's realm. That was the place they asked him to be returned to after locking him up, she said to Ryuk, who hummed. Locked him up? Zafir asked, and Ryuk shrugged carelessly. It's a long story, but if you're so curious about him, how about we branch to the Void Beast realm before we head to where you're going? He offered, and she nodded, stepping out of the realm. Ryuk followed, his hands gripped by Isha, who also stepped out with him, and the realm door faded, leaving the garden in its tranquility. Come closer to me, mademoiselle. Let me whisper you a hello. The whisper rang out through a violet-colored throne room where about 6 figures could be seen. For were guards dressed in violet-colored knight armor that hid most of their features, but it left their hands' sides revealed, and it wasn't hands but paws of dark fur gripping onto spears. At the end of the throne room was, of course, the humongous violet-colored throne, and on it sat a woman. A chubby woman with furs on her cheeks, while on her lap was a cat. Cute and tiny, with shining black fur as dark as night yet incredibly lustrous. Light seemed to glide off the cat's fur, leading to an almost celestial phenomenon. But right now, the eyes of the guards in the armor were twitching repeatedly, their faces red with suppressed embarrassment. The cat was none other than Void, who climbed over the woman's thighs, expertly making his way toward her chest. Oh, Elian, aren't you just the most perfect of them all? The woman said as Void's tail flew beneath her neck, making her release giggling purrs. As much as I know how blessed I am, I must speak the truth, like I always have, Void claimed with a compassionate, cute face that made the woman's eyes turn into bulbs, looking at Void entrancedly. And clearly the words were spoken. You, mademoiselle, aren't just the most perfect amongst them, you're the most gorgeous, she said to the woman, raising her hands and giving a gentle kiss. In return, she dragged him closer to her bosom, and Void's eyes almost rolled to the back of his head. Ah, this is it, the true purpose of life. Oh, Elian, how lucky am I to have you in my life, she cried out. Oh, mademoiselle, only the opposite is true, he said as her hug tightened. I, Void, have been through a lot of difficulties all my life, he said, watching her eyes rippling with pity. All my life has been nothing but one hardship after another. I've been forced to fight on the front lines of wars, face opponents that are stronger than me by more than 2 cultivation stages. And even though I, Void, have never lost a battle before, or I wouldn't be here, all my efforts have been met with nothing but disappointing words like "you could do better," or "you're such a useless thing." He narrated with a downcast expression, a line of tears slipping down the woman's eyes even as the guards' heads turned fully red. Such level of shamelessness. Oh, poor Elian, to think you have suffered so much in the hands of such a wicked soul, she said as she dragged him even into her embrace, and Void's smile reached his ears. If only I could lay my hands on him, I would make sure he pays for his wicked acts, she said, and Void shook his head. Oh, do not bother with him, mademoiselle. After all, his wicked acts will only make sure he remains a bitchless eunuch of a bastard all his life, Void said with a reined-in cackling. What the? Void, you lecherous bastard! The roar rang out through the throne room, and in the next moment, the Void was splintered through as Ryuk jumped out, smoke escaping his nostrils. You dare! The woman on the throne said in shock, looking at the unannounced entrance. But Void's calm voice came first. Oh, do not worry yourself with him, mademoiselle. Only I am deserving of such. Guards! He called out as the guards readied their spears. Send this giant block of an idiot to hell, he said, waving his paws, only for his words to die in his mouth when a hand stretched out from the Void and grabbed Void's 2 back legs. What the? Bang! The world spun as Void was thrown like a meteor, slamming into the ceiling before falling onto the ground flat like a paste. You! Get rid of him! The queen on the throne roared out as the guards sped toward the giant, only for him to wave down once. Immediately, all of them were sent lying flat on their chests, spittle soon pouring out of their lips. They had all been knocked out cold. Void wobbled off his feet from the floor he had crashed into, turning his eyes upward to find the giant walking toward him while folding the sleeves on his wrist. "You long bastard," Void cursed out. "I'll make sure you die so cruelly no bitch will mourn," he started saying when a familiar giggling sound echoed through the throne room, and Void turned behind him. Right there were two ladies with quite the bountiful bosom, but he recognized one of them the instant he saw her, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Isha?" he called out, only for realization to dawn upon him as he turned forward, only to find a hand clamping down on his neck and dragging him up the ground. "Wait, you're Ryuk?" Now it made sense why he had known his real name. Ryuk. Bina. Bang. "Hey, what are you?" Bang. "Oi, that was close to the SPO." Bang. Bang. "He's killing me." Boom. "Are you sure he's not going to kill him?" Zafri said, watching as Ryuk and Void ran across the throne room, which in a couple of minutes had been turned upside down. "Nah, they're just having fun," Isha said with a shrug, wincing slightly when the loud scream of her name echoed out from Void. The Void Panther rapidly raced away from Ryuk, puffing in and out of void vortexes to close in on Isha, only to enter into a random void and find itself right before Ryuk, who grabbed its neck, and quickly, another one-sided beating occurred. "Isha, help me!" he screamed, and Isha rolled her eyes, finally stepping forward. A void appeared as Void disappeared into it, barely avoiding a smack to his head. He conjured another portal and rushed into it, only for a second portal to replace the one he entered in the last split second before his entrance. When he appeared, he was right before Ryuk's outstretched palm once more. But just before Ryuk's hand grabbed at his neck. Bang! It slammed into a wall of ice instead, and Void fell back, only to land in Isha's hands. The ice wall crumbled from Ryuk's hand grab, and he reached toward Void, although he survived as Isha scurried away with him, giggling. "Tsh, lecherous bastard," Ryuk cursed out, finally letting Void go. That bastard not only changed the name he'd given it, but also dared call him a useless eunuch. All for the sake of a bosom? He, Ryuk, had been betrayed for a bosom? "Isha!" Void cried out as he crawled into Isha's bosom. The fur on its neck had been peeled off, same for the one around its butt. "He almost killed me," Void claimed as Isha rolled her eyes. "Can you stop scratching my dress?" she said, and Void paused his cry, slowly taking away his claws from her bosom. "Tsh, that bastard!" Ryuk cursed, about to give a second beating, but he paused when Zafri appeared by his side. "So, this is Void?" she asked. "No. That is my Elyon." The loud shout came from the side as everyone in the room turned their gaze to the chubby woman sitting on the throne. Her chest heaved up and down in anger as she stared at all four, most especially at Ryuk, who turned to look at Void. "Hey, Void, who is the fat woman?" "Fat woman?" the astonished woman exclaimed in disbelief, but her heart sank further with the next words. Void looked at the bosom he was lying on, that familiar soft bosom of Isha, which was like being placed in a cool ice bath. Even calling it a heavenly sensation couldn't capture the true depth of the experience. He turned, giving one look at the chubby woman from the tip of his nose. "I don't know her," he claimed, and Isha giggled, while Ryuk clicked his tongue. But she didn't find it funny at all. "Elyon, are you saying that to protect me? Even in such a situation, you're still so considerate. You really are a blessing to my gorgeous self," she claimed, and Void gave the woman a dumbfounded look. "Gorgeous? Hey, Ryuk," he called out, and Ryuk turned to him. "You got a mirror for the fat bitch?" "I don't," Ryuk replied honestly, though that only made it comical, making even Zafri giggle. You cheater," the woman screamed out, her hair blowing crazily in the wind as a powerful aura descended onto the room. "You will pay for your betrayal." Awaken Void Centurions! She roared out in anger, and the next moment, the entire hall began quavering, almost like an earthquake was occurring. The name of Void Centurions made Void's spine chill, and he immediately opened up a vortex. Goodbye, fat bitch. And just so you know, your bosom ain't even that soft. He screamed, immediately jumping into the portal and running off. Ryuk didn't think he had any more business in here, and he would like to avoid a senseless battle, so he also followed into the portal. Same for Zafri and Isha. I'll find you, you bastards. Yes, Zafri, this is Void, Ryuk said as the group of four sat around a table in a restaurant. Void turned away from his milk, looking at Zafri, who stared back at him, and she watched as his eyes moved down from her eyes and paused right on her chest. A lecherous glint flashed in his eyes, and with swag, Void crawled across the table. Hola, beautiful? Might I be blessed with the honor of a hand kiss? He said, his hands sneaking to Zafri's. Yet before it touched, one of Zafri's fingers turned to a tentacle that lashed over Void's head. But the cat was fast managing to puff away and scurry back to Ryuk. Humph, cheater, Zafri said with a disgusted huff. She, of course, had seen what the lecherous cat had done and how he had quickly turned against his mademoiselle. No way she'd allow herself to get charmed by such a lecherous cat. Oh, you fiery one, huh? Pissed, Ryuk. Who's the tentacle girl? Void whispered, dragging his milk close to Ryuk, who responded. This is Zafri. She's my third fusion, he said, as light crisscrossed in Void's eyes. So, she's the youngest, huh? He whispered, both claws rubbing against each other. I guess, Ryuk said dumbfoundedly. She might be young, but that bosom ain't small at all. No, it ain't. Boink. His head chucked in as Ryuk's knock slammed into Void's head, waking it from its daydream. Shut up. Void clicked his tongue, continuing to drink his milk. So, all these days, you've been doing nothing but lusting around bosoms all this while? Isha asked as Void paused. Isha, I am truly sorry, he said, but this time he was serious. With just me alone, there wasn't much I could do. I tried to sneak into the Wyvernoid Kingdom, but after my 7th failure, they had a total of 10 experts around the kingdom, their only job being to watch out for my Void Vortex. I swear to bosoms I Void only gave up after my 23rd failure. It's fine. I wasn't hurt in there, and Ryuk came to rescue me, Isha said as Void crawled towards her with a downcast expression. Climbing over Isha and spreading both arms wide for a hug, he whispered, I'm truly sorry, Isha. Don't be mad at poor me, he said, only for his tail to be grabbed by Ryuk as she dragged him off her bosom and threw him on the table. Hey, a gentleman can't even console some nice boso. I mean girls, no more? He shot back at Ryuk, who rolled his eyes before whispering. Bosoms will be the end of you one day. You know that, right? Void, who acted like he didn't hear, rapidly stuck his tongue in and out of the bowl of milk. Through all of this, Zafri observed quietly, and truly, his words about them considering his contracted beasts as family weren't a lie at all. Even though Void and Ryuk argued a lot and got into fights almost every minute, the bond between them was clear. The same was true for Isha, the calmest amongst them. She couldn't help but notice something different about Ryuk. His aura had changed. Back then, it had always been somber, but now, with his aura was freer like one unshackled. He smiled more, talked more, and argued more. It was a complete 360-degree change from the usual him. So this is what a family is? It's beautiful, she thought to herself, only to be woken up by the call. So, Zafri, where did you plan to go? She dispersed her thought, voicing out. The Croconoid Kingdom. I've heard that place before, Void said, pausing slightly and arresting the group's attention. Isn't it all water and fish? He asked, making them roll their eyes. They're krakens, you idiot. What else were you expecting? Ryuk scoffed as Void stuck out its tongue. But then, He couldn't help but wonder why Zafri wanted to visit the kingdom. Perhaps her parents were still alive, and she wanted to check on them? But that also reminded him of her mentioning the Zafir Krakens being royalty amongst Krakens. Her background didn't seem that simple, but if she were a royal, how did she even get captured by that organization in the first place? That made him truly curious and hence invested in the journey. Void finished his milk, collapsing on his side, exhausted. Ryuk eyed the dozens of basins on the table and rolled his eyes. Not only was the thing lecherous, it was also gluttonous. Before he could snore off, Ryuk snapped his hands, and a mini vortex appeared in the space beside him. Void asked, "What is that?" "The new pet space. You finally got your shit back together, huh?" Void said, quickly crawling into the vortex before Ryuk could grab its tail. "Now this is what I'm talking about." The elated scream could be heard just as Ryuk shut the vortex. "I'm ready when you are," he said to Zafri, who rose, and the trio moved out. The Krokonoid Kingdom is quite far, though. "We'll need to get transport beasts," Zafri said, pointing to a side where various creatures could be seen, winged and four-legged beasts. But before she could move, Isha grabbed her shoulder, pulling her back. "There'll be no need for that," she said, and in the next moment, Zafri found her legs dangling in the air, lifted by Isha. The world flashed past in a blur of motion, and before she knew it, she was thrown high into the open sky. As she turned her head down, she was shocked to see the back of a gigantic creature, its sight enough to cloud her entire vision. In the next moment, Ryuk glitched and appeared by her side, grabbing her before she slammed her face on the scaly back and gently helping her to land on her feet instead. "Wait," she muttered as she observed the creature in full. It was covered entirely in white scales, spanning up to a full 100 meters, with 4 gigantic limbs and 2 massive wings. What really blew her mind was the singular horn radiating an incredible amount of frost energy. An ice dragon? It wasn't only Zafri that was surprised, even Ryuk, though without much change to his expression, felt numb. Isha has reached the peak of her evolutionary state. Ice dragon. The system panel flashed, and a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. From her just being an ice serpent, she had grown, evolving again and again until she was now at her peak, a full ice dragon. "Isha is an ice dragon? I thought she was a frost wyvern?" Zafri said in disbelief, and the words echoed out. "I evolved," she said, and Zafri looked on blankly before whispering, "I've never heard of a frost wyvern evolving to become an ice dragon before. How does my new form look, Ryuk?" Isha's voice rang telepathically into his mind. In response, Ryuk sat upon her back before gently pressing his hand against her scale. Pink light coalesced in his palms and quickly spread all over her scales, resulting in her glowing with a soft pink light. He did not say a word in reply, but Isha felt it, the joy and pride in his heart. "Thank you," she whispered telepathically, her aura jumping by twice due to the pink aura, and she rushed forward with speed as the group quickly approached the Krokonoid Kingdom. A journey that ought to have taken at least a day or two was done in less than 2 hours as they arrived amidst crushing sea waves. It was dark, pitch-black sea wherever the eyes could see. A cloud of storm gathered above as powerful lightning crisscrossed through the sky. "This is it?" Ryuk asked as he looked down at the sea of dark waters beneath him. It was the most powerful sea wave he had ever seen. The mere weight of it embroils the air with faint pressure. If an entity at the eternity stage were thrown into this water, chances are they would drown in a minute. "Yes, beneath is the Krokonoid Kingdom," she said, and Ryuk hummed as they floated off Isha's back. SH rose high into the air before clouds of frost puffed through the sky, and Isha returned to her humanoid form. One look at the sea beneath and Isha called out, "Can I return to the pet space?" In the next moment, Ryuk opened up the vortex, and Isha disappeared into it before it shut. It left just Zafri and Ryuk, standing above the crushing dark sea waves. "Have you met with a kraken before?" Zafar asked as Ryuk paused, looking at the sea beneath him. I have once, he said. When he had gone to Nihility, he had been face to face with that kraken in the sea, fighting it alongside Orlith. Quite unreasonable, wasn't it? She said, and Ryuk shrugged. I don't think I ever got a chance to have a talk with it at all. But they don't seem like something that would sit down to reason with someone, he admitted, and she grinned. There are a lot of them down there, and trust me, all krakens are annoying. Just bear with it, she said before she moved down, disappearing into the sea. With an inhale, Ryuk also followed in, only to find a kraken about 200 meters in span right around him. The tentacles were 8, massive and long, in a purple color, and the spurs beneath oozed with orange light, the color of Oregon energy. He turned behind him and found the 4 massive eyes looking right at him. Magnificent, he called, watching the eyes roll at him. A tentacle moved, grabbing at Ryuk's legs before pulling him roughly. In the next moment, he found himself sitting atop the kraken's head, and the water around them waved heavily as Zafar swam forward. She was fast, incredibly fast, and if one could see from above, they would notice a massive wave that rapidly reached into the distance, clearly even amidst the already crashing sea waves. Swimming for about 15 minutes, the duo finally came across the tentacles, and Ryuk was left speechless. Whatever this kraken was, it was so humongous that the tentacles were like unending pillars that stretched into the distance, and he couldn't immediately see the full body. Continuing deeper, he saw even more tentacles, and after another 5 minutes, they finally came before it. It wasn't 2 or 4 but 6 massive eyes that stared at Ryuk and Zafar. Even the huge Zafar was like a little child to this one kraken, and she eyed both of them. A Zafar kraken? The kraken called out in shock, looking at Zafar before its eyes settled upon Ryuk. You're not allowed here, it roared out, only to be silenced when powerful orange energy burst out from Zafar's tentacles, making her resemble the sun. Open the gate, Valard. The roar was loud. The kraken reeled back in shock. It wasn't from the power of the attack, but the tone of it. It wasn't just a request. It was an absolute command that made every blood cell within the kraken quiver. He hummed deeply, recovering from it before 2 of his tentacles moved together, and soon enough, they formed a circle. You're responsible for any danger he causes in the realm, Valard said before the water around his tentacles twisted in, space folding in as it gave way to a humongous vortex. Without wasting any more words, Zafar moved, though Valard's eyes still collided hard with Ryuk's even as they disappeared in. Darkness was all there was for a moment, but in the next seconds light came and they arrived. Welcome to the Krakenoid Kingdom. The sight of the kingdom beneath him made Ryuk's heart skip a beat. It was truly a kingdom where every structure was beyond humongous and shaped like tentacles. It was brightly illuminated, with tentacles to be seen in every corner, and most of all, it was filled with krakens. Dark krakens, white krakens, blue krakens, purple krakens. There were every single color of kraken in here, each one swimming around. And even though there was no particular order or line, surprisingly, there was order. To think there would be such a place beneath such a tumultuous sea, he muttered beneath his breath as Zafar swam forward. Naturally, the presence of the duo arrested attention, and the reason was simple. For one, Zafar krakens were recognized immediately, for their purple colors were rare. Incredibly so. The sight of one was something to pause and take a second look at. But what was truly shocking was the humanoid-looking figure that stood atop her. The Krakenoid Kingdom wasn't a welcoming kingdom, nor one that appreciated other races, especially land-looking races. That was immediately clear judging by Ryuk's humanoid form. To have such a person riding upon a Zafar kraken, now that was truly abnormal. But they didn't give much reaction or try to approach them. Just an eye glance, and they continued on their way. There was no noise save for the sound of water whooshing by from tentacular movement, making it quite a calm place. I can grow used to this. Don't be ridiculous, Zafar said telepathically. She seemed to have a place in mind as they continued deeper and deeper into the underwater sea. Quickly enough, Ryuk discovered where they were going. The center of the Krakenoid Kingdom, where a towering structure covered in purple lights dwarfed other structures around it by more than twice. It was a truly humongous building, and so well designed it was eye-catching even from so far away. Ryuk didn't say much, but he was proven right when Zafir floated up to the massive gate of the building, where two krakens, white in color, were in wait. Both krakens' eyes displayed shock upon seeing her, though Zafir's eyes were as dull as ever. They didn't say a word or try to stop her. Instead, they coiled the tentacles they held together, and the massive gate soon opened up. Zafir continued into the mansion, and they entered the compound where Ryuk found more than a dozen Zafir krakens around, all looking at Zafir in shock. Wait, isn't that Zafir? Zafir? The lost princess? She's back. Do you see the one above her? Preposterous. To all of these whispers, it was like Zafir was deaf, and soon she arrived before the central structure. This time, it was two Zafir krakens standing at the gate, and both had their tentacles crossed over it. I wish to have an audience with the king, Zafir said, but neither kraken moved. You'll need an appointment to meet the king, which you clearly do not have. Besides, a land animal is unworthy of appearing before the king's gaze. Ha ha ha. The abuse was so good that Ryuk chuckled in amusement instead. In the thickening pressure, Ryuk's loud laughter made them raise an eyebrow, and even Zafir furrowed her eyebrows, and he stopped, whispering a quiet, I'm sorry. You say I need an invitation to see the king? I promise you both, when I finally see him, I'll also be seeing it through that both of you get hanged, Zafir said, and Ryuk watched as the expressions of both Zafir kraken guards changed. She turned away, only to pause when one of the guards quickly spoke. Well, we can help a little by asking the king if he is free to attend to you, one of them said as Zafir hummed, swimming towards the door. Open it, she commanded them. This time they didn't try to argue back, and the door opened wide. This made it clear to Ryuk. They feared her words, and it seemed they would be truly hanged if they refused her. It made her wonder just what her relationship with the king was, and what type of king would so easily hang his guards. When they stepped in, it was like stepping through a new world. An incredibly grand throne hall of purple with massive pillars at every corner. But that wasn't what took the majority of Ryuk's attention. It was what stood at the end of the throne hall. A humongous throne, where an equally humongous being sat. It was a masculine figure, incredibly muscular and as tall as a titan. What was more were the 6 massive bulging hands he had, resting upon the throne's armrest. Long purple hair trailed over his figure, part of it covering his face and obscuring his true features. A throne rested on his head, glinting with a purple light, whose glow encapsulated the entire throne room. The steps to his throne were guarded by a total of 6 10-meter-tall tridents, all releasing a pulsing arc of energy that flowed through the entire throne room. In the next instant, Zafir's form changed, turning humanoid. But it was a different humanoid. Zafir had formerly just copied the form of one of her Nexus Legion Ascendant generals, but this time she took a new form. Her true form, where she appeared completely different from the person Ryuk was used to, but he knew it was still Zafir. Why did she never use this form until now? He mused silently to himself, but then his brows creased when he watched her knees reach for the ground. Before they did, Zafir felt a hand grab her shoulder, and in the next moment, she was whisked back to her feet. Her eyes flashed with surprise as she turned to Ryuk, only to see a blue vein pulsing on his forehead. Do not kneel for a being in my presence, he said. Ever. It wasn't a statement. It was an absolute command, the first of its kind, and it shook Zafir's heart. A deep hum reverberated through the throne room, and Ryuk turned, finding the crown being slowly raising his head. And from the space of his hair, a violet light shone upon the world, the result of 2 eyes that had opened. They settled upon Ryuk, holding an unfathomable level of pressure and calm. In the next moment, the crowned being fully rose from his throne, and all pillars of the throne room began quivering. It was as if the crowned being himself was what truly held everything together. Standing upright, he stood at 20 meters tall, and one of his massive hands reached out, grabbing one of the 8 tridents. Even if your own act of not kneeling could be excused for ignorance. Do you now ask for my own daughter to not kneel before me? His voice, though calm, held incredible vigor that resonated continuously. Daughter? Ryuk muttered in shock, turning to look at Zafri, who turned her gaze to the side, not arguing against it. But the shock lasted only for a moment. Ryuk stepped forward toward the being, walking the entire 300 meters of the throne room to stand directly before him, barely centimeters away. He raised his head, and their gaze collided hard. Even if you were her god, she will not kneel for you in my presence. The voice wasn't loud, but it was incredibly clear and filled with deadly, unshakable conviction. Almost as if the heavens would fall before those words would be taken back. You're arrogant. Not like there was much more to be expected from a jade dragon, the being said, recognizing his base form, but Ryuk's expression was unchanging. I think it will do the entire kingdom some good if you calm down a bit, Yoramunda. A gentler voice echoed, and out from the side of the throne, a purple door manifested. The sight of it made Zafar's eyes flash with shock, and much to her disbelief, she stepped out. A woman, so beautiful it was like she never belonged to this world. But not only her beauty, her form was also eye-catching. Her torso was humanoid, while beneath that was a massive fishtail, 2 meters long, glinting with purple lights. Celeste? The crowned being said in shock, his hard expression thawing at the sight of the woman. Ryuk gazed upon the mermaid, but his expression didn't change. Beauty had never moved him for as long as he could remember, but his expression changed slightly when he watched a person swim into the woman's hands, embracing her tightly. Mother, you're finally awake. Zafri's voice echoed tearfully, and a single tear also rolled down from the woman's eye, only to turn into a purple pearl as it hit the glowing ground. Zafri, she whispered, swimming upward in a spiral. How long had it been since she last held her own daughter in her hands? Yoramunda turned from them, looking at Ryuk, but then he stepped back, digging his trident into the ground and taking a seat upon his throne. He had retreated, and Ryuk didn't sense the slightest fear from him, yet he did. It was from the words. He turned his gaze back up and found the woman swimming down from the sky with the beaming Zafri. I do not think Zafri told you anything about us both, did she? She was right. Ryuk had indeed never been told anything by Zafri, just that they would be going somewhere and he was accompanying her. He didn't know about the Croconoid Kingdom, nor was he aware of its king being her father, nor her mother being a mermaid. I'm sorry. You'll have to blame her father for her impulsive acts, she said, turning to look at King Yoramunda, who had his brows furrowed at her. But then she furrowed hers in return, and immediately his expression faltered as he gave up. He turned to look to the side instead, avoiding her gaze. For a being as powerful as he is, he does seem to fear his wife. The system panel blinked before Ryuk's eyes. He might be a tyrannical king, the woman said to Ryuk, but he is also a good man. That doesn't even go together, Ryuk thought quietly before he turned away from her. Looking at Zafi, he communicated telepathically, I cannot stand the presence of your father, but you deserve time with your parents. Stay as long as you want. I will be around the kingdom. Ryuk, In the next moment, the space where Ryuk stood collapsed in, covering him, and when the water settled, he was no longer there. Stepping out, he appeared right above the entire Croconoid kingdom, overseeing it all. His brows creased at the center building that held that crowned being, Zafar's father. For some reason, he felt like raking his claws through that man's heart and ripping it out in cold blood. He truly couldn't stand having him around. Even after the woman had lessened the pressure, his bloodlust refused to calm. You're very possessive, the system suddenly noted as Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows, silently floating away. Am I? He replied. Possessiveness as a topic had never occurred to him before. Yes, you are. Especially to those you consider yours, even though you don't show that much possessiveness to them in person. What made you say that? Back when Morgaine had kneeled before that elder of her clan. The second she was out, you crushed him to the ground, almost killing him in the end. The same thing is repeating with Zafir now. It said, having noticed a pattern that had escaped even Ryuk. Truly, seeing Morgaine kneeling before Elder Nagarasuk had sent him into a frenzy, and he indeed felt like killing him off back then. But he had an inkling why that was, and it was different from the systems. I'm not very possessive, he replied. I just consider kneeling as a degrading act. When Morgaine had kneeled before that elder, he had looked down upon her from his throne with a higher gaze. It wasn't the act of kneeling, but that degrading stance and gaze that made me want to kill him. The same is true for Zafir. Kneeling for a being who couldn't even be bothered to open his eyes to honor her kneeling. Even if he is her father, I still cannot stand that. In a way, kneeling before a person to me is like a way to show they're superior to you. And that's something I hate to see being done to my own. So even if that can be considered being possessive, I think it's the right amount of possessiveness. He added, and the system didn't try to argue with it. Indeed, what type of man will allow others to walk over his own or look at them with a condescending gaze? Having left the castle, he swam aimlessly around, and by the second, he continued swimming farther and farther away from the Crocanoid kingdom. After some time, he hummed silently, noticing the water had somehow gotten even darker, and there was suddenly a higher concentration of abyssal energy in the water. But that didn't bother him. It only made his Nullic side even more comfortable due to the abyssal energy. But soon enough he came across a wall. A truly bizarre wall that went as high as Ryuk could see. When his hand touched the wall, his eyes flickered with surprise. This wasn't a wall. It was dead bones. Exactly. It was bones stacked up so high they formed a gigantic wall that stretched up for as far as his exceptional sight could see. Krakens were huge creatures, so he didn't find it surprising that killing enough could form such bones. But that also made him curious. Why did so many Krakens die? And was the wall a dead end or a divider? To answer the question, Ryuk swam up, but after almost an hour of swimming, the wall continued, and he never reached the surface at all. That was when it occurred to him. It's like a loop. You keep going up only to somehow arrive where you started, and then go up and get thrown back to where you began again. There's probably some runic formation around, Ryuk mused to himself, looking at the walls. Just leave it alone. The system panel blinked, but that only made Ryuk's interest kindle. I want to know what lies beyond this wall. Why? Just curious. Whatever, it said. In the next moment, Ryuk's form changed from his previous draconic form to a Nullic form, and in the next moment, his massive dark claws slammed into the wall. Boom! The water rippled massively, and he watched as a purple runic wall suddenly appeared all over the bone wall. It was the loop runic formation. Hey, Ryuk! Aha! You know, for them to have a wall of bones and even place runic formation all over it, then it's quite clear it's not ordinary. If the wall is used to hold something back and you break it apart, you'll be dooming the entire kingdom for your act of curiosity. The system panel flashed, and it wasn't something Ryuk could ignore. I don't have to break the runes. I can, he said, and in the next moment, his body shifted back to his draconic form. Ryuk's hands reached toward the runic line, and it naturally came to a stop. But then, his body suddenly turned ephemeral. He lost his physical form, becoming a coalescence of motes of light, and at that moment, Ryuk's hands also lost their solidity, phasing straight through the formation. His body instantly underwent the same change, and Ryuk phased completely through the runic formation as if they didn't exist. The same occurred for the bone walls, and he completely disappeared from the Crocanoid area of the kingdom. It was cold. Even for Ryuk, who was used to cold, it was still cold, and it was dark. Pitch black. When he stepped out of the wall, his body regained its physicality, and he silently swam forward. Now that he was in here, he could feel the abyssal energy concentration greater than ever, making him want to switch to his Nullic form. And he did. In an instant, he went from the sleek, scaly form to the more brutish, ash-painted Nullik form and swam forward. Only after swimming through the deep darkness for about an hour did Ryuk pause. There was no longer a path to continue. Instead, an unending chasm stood right before him. An abyss, deeper than anything Ryuk had ever seen, with his vision failing to find its end. Yet, deep from that abyss, he could feel even more abyssal energy churning out like a wave. Just what is hidden down there? He thought to himself, and in the next moment he swam down. Halfway down the abyss, the space around him rippled like stepping through a vortex. It had occurred faster than he could react, and when he reappeared, surprise colored his face. It was a new world where ginormous dark pillars stretched into the distance as far as his eyes could see. But it wasn't the pillars, it was what lay coiled around them. They were tentacles woven around these huge pillars, and their source was from a race of pitch-black abyssal krakens. The pillars were uncountable, the same as the number of krakens, and when Ryuk saw them, his heart jumped a bit. There were so many krakens before him, and unlike the krakens he had seen before, these were different. Their auras were dark, oozing with ripples of abyssal energy. All had their eyes shut tight, but not for long, almost as if they could sense his presence. 1,000 crimson eyes snapped open all at once, each one locking directly onto Ryuk. His spine chilled looking at them all at once. A voice rang out after, "It's been more than a century since something else came from the other side. How have you done it, Null?" The words resonated through as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. They had all been locked in here for a century? Now he knew why the dark walls and the runic lines were over them. It was truly to divide the kingdom into two, with the other side filled with the abyssal krakens. It matched what Zafri had told him a long time ago, that there were krakens that used apex energy and others that used abyssal energy, while there were only 3 that used special energy, save for the main 2. This must be the abyssal krakens. "There is a wall. I simply phased through it," he replied. "Was it King Yoramunda that locked you all here?" He asked after, only for a sharp, disdainful voice to follow. "Do you think that slave of a fish could hold us all back? It took all the remaining 7 Krakenoid races working together to keep us abyssal krakens in this abyss. And the bones used to make that walls didn't look like ours, did they?" The voice came almost like a roar, yet filled with absolute pride, and maybe a bit of wickedness. "Interesting. I thought the bone walls were just a simple dead end. Never expected it to hide an entire race of krakens," he thought to himself before turning to the abyssal krakens. "You're proud of your might, but you all are the ones rotting beneath the abyss. What's that arrogance I feel from you?" he asked, watching as the crimson stares ignited, massive pressure flooding out. They did not win. They could not win. They wanted to get rid of us. They wanted to wipe us out, but they failed. In the end, they could only keep us locked. We never failed. Neither were we ever defeated." The voice roared back, only to quiet down a moment later before rumbling again. "What is your purpose here, Null?" "I already said it. I was just wandering around. Now that I've seen what's here, I don't think there's any use staying any longer," he added, turning his back. But he had not gone very far when the words boomed. "Release us." Ryuk paused. "Release us, and we will grant you one of your greatest wishes," it said, as Ryuk slowly turned, amusement in his eyes. And what if I don't?" "We will kill you. Hundreds of thousands of krakens have died by our hands, and we have ended more races than you have ever seen. You will be dead in an instant," it said, and in that moment, Ryuk noticed a dome of abyssal energy phasing out from the world and masking everything. He turned behind him and found the dome, his hand reaching for it, only to slightly jerk back when he felt the stinging electricity. This dome repels all that possessed abyssal energy and keeps everything locked in. "You will not be able to escape," the voice said, only to watch in the next moment as Ryuk's Nullik body suddenly changed. His brutish form turned sleeker, becoming a jade dragon, and when his hand touched the dome this time, it phased right through. In a second, Ryuk was out of the dome, appearing on the other side. From there, He looked at the krakens, watching the glint of dumb disbelief that crossed their eyes. You said something about keeping me locked in? What was that again? Ryuk snickered, taunting tone in his voice, and continued out of the place. You? The voice said, but Ryuk didn't pause. A dragon, a null, a perfect fusion of two opposing bloodlines. The voice came like a rambling chant, and Ryuk unconsciously slowed down. I know you. You're Ryuk, it roared out. And here comes the annoying part, Ryuk thought silently. Ryuk, the king of two dooms. Ryuk's heart pounded loudly. It was the first time he had ever been referred to as something different from son of Faith Vorgoth. The king of two dooms? He asked in confusion. This was the first time he had heard such a name. The dragons upon your birth called you the Draconis. The voice rang out. The nulls upon your birth called you the son of carnage. Your father was a royal amongst his race, and your mother was the daughter of Vel'Ziraka, the purest royal bloodline of the dragons. You're a natural-born king the world knew would never find his place, as neither of your races will accept you as the Dragon King or the Null King. So, they referred to you as the King of Two Dooms. It said, and Ryuk's heart thumped slightly. He stepped forward, moving closer to the barrier, and spoke. You seem to know more about the past. Know more about the past? I watched the past unfold. Then tell me more, Ryuk said, his hand landing upon the barrier, and in an instant, cracks rang across its surface as it shattered with a loud bang. He took a single step forward, and a tsunami of water waves followed his steps as he appeared right before a particular pair of gigantic crimson eyes. Tell me about the past, Ryuk said, only for a thunderous laughter to ring through. Why should I even bother? It said in mockery, and Ryuk hummed under his breath before turning back, looking at all the crimson eyes around him. I will free you all, he said, and in that moment, a rift appeared, a rift within which was a garden. This rift can keep all of you, and once you're all in, I will phase through the bone wall and then let you out again. Don't you all wish to be free? Ryuk taunted, watching the crimson glow in their eyes light up with desire, though the rift was shut back with a wave of his hand. He turned back to the large crimson eyes, the only one who seemed capable of speech, and spoke. So, what do you say? You're unlike your father, were the next words that came as Ryuk paused. Your father was a puppet, and the advantage of that was truth. Once given an order for destruction, he would arrive before the world and say, I will destroy you all, and in the next moment, the world would be destroyed just as he said. He was a puppet of that bastard called Null, but at the same time he never lied. Nor did he ever switch midway. But you? You're free, the Kraken shot back. You may keep us in your rift to free us, only to leave us stuck within there forever. Besides, though surrounded by us all, you have not a single trace of fear and even walked back into the trap, meaning you never ran from it in the first place. You're far stronger than you look, and definitely must have an ulterior motive. Ryuk's eyes flicker in surprise before he grins. A devilish grin. His draconic form instantly faded as he became a null once more. You're awfully smart, Ryuk said, cackling evilly. To be honest, I didn't plan on keeping you in my rift at all. I just wanted to hear your part of the story and then continue on my way. You all think you can hold me back, but that's a fantasy in your heads. Ryuk whispered, turning his head to give a lazy look at the thousands of krakens behind him. If I wanted you all dead, you would all die. If I wanted to leave, that's 1,000 times easier. He whispered, watching in the next moment as the water heavily rumbled. You underestimate us, Ryuk Null. The crimson eyes flared even brighter, but Ryuk merely shrugged, ignoring them. As much as I can end you, I feel you're slightly different, he added, as the rumbling waves paused. You see, all like to tie me with Faith Vorgoth, attaching my importance to him. Son of Faith Vorgoth, son of Faith Vorgoth, they all say. How sickening are those words? Ryuk's claws burned with purple energy, but they soon calmed as his expression relaxed. But it's good to finally be referred differently for once. The King of Two Dooms, huh? It's ridiculous, but I don't hate it outright, at least, he murmured, continuing. And you indeed said I was strong. You looked deeper than just being the son of Thaith Vorgoth. You know, the Nulls are so foolish. They call me the son of Thaith Vorgoth and idolize him so much. Yet, in one way or another, they paint me as weak. They look at me and expect me to be weak, even though they admire Thaith Vorgoth for being so strong? Ridiculous idiots. He cursed, and in the next moment he sat down, looking at the kraken before him. You abyssal krakens are the only race I find mildly interesting amongst others, so I want to know you. Tell me, why were the abyssal krakens locked away? What evil have you all committed? He asked. To say it didn't shock him would be a lie. A century of being locked away in this abyss, and who could have expected the one to finally enter to be Ryuk Null, the King of Two Dooms? But what was more shocking was how he sat amidst danger, eyes still curious toward their origin. It was as if he couldn't feel danger at all. Was he immune to fear like his father, or was he just that confident in his power? If he was confident in his power, then how come he looked somehow puny? You're more interesting than I expected you to be, the voice called out with a slight cackle. I am Uramunda, the king of abyssal krakens, he introduced. Why does that sound awfully similar to the Zafri Kraken King's name? He mused. That's because Uramunda is my little brother, he added, as Ryuk raised an eyebrow. Now I want to know even more. Exactly how much time had passed, Ryuk couldn't really say, because he never bothered to consider. But what he considered were the words spoken by King Uramunda. The Kraken recounted to him how and why his clan had ultimately been sealed away by the other Krakens. So, you wished to sow fear into the minds of all, making sure no race would ever dare to mess with you. But your wish went overboard, even by the standards of the other clans. According to them, you had become too destructive, and in the end, needed to all be locked away. That was the complete summary of what had happened with the Abyssal Krakens. They were a violent clan that lusted for destruction, but that very destruction made the Kraken race feared creatures. And it was true. When the name Kraken was mentioned, everyone could imagine the giant octopus that pulled down entire ships to the bottom of the sea, leaving but one survivor to narrate the horror. The name itself sent fear into hearts upon its mention, and it seemed the Abyssal Kraken clan was the one responsible for that legacy. They sank any ship that entered their territory, eliminating entire races. They were greatly feared, but the cost of this fear wasn't just the world's hatred. The other Kraken races began to see them as too evil, and so, they joined hands to lock them away. What do you think, Ryuk? King Uramunda asked. Most would call it karma, for the millions of innocent souls our race dragged to the depths and drowned. But I want to know what you, in particular, think of it. King Uramunda asked again, curiosity echoing in his tone as Ryuk's brow creased slightly. The fear you created is what the Kraken race is still surviving with now, he began, as King Uramunda listened silently. Races are destroyed every day in the upper realms, and nowhere is truly safe. To survive, one must possess a fearful status and reputation, and you Abyssal Krakens were the ones who created that fearful status and reputation. Even though the world might not know you've all been locked away, they still fear the Krakens. They still fear you. And because of that, the Krakenoid kingdom remains untouched. This is the advantage of your evils, he analyzed, as King Uramunda's deep rumble echoed through the waters. But you pulling down innocents and drowning them in the depths could never be excused, Ryuk continued. You killed men, women, and children, all for the sake of creating a halo of protection for your kind. Even though it seemed noble, it was still an extreme evil. To have taken that so far that even your own race deemed it necessary to stop you, then I can only imagine the pain of those whose families were dragged to their deaths by your kind. If I had lost a family to the Krakens, I would have gone on a revengeful journey, hunting each of you one by one until your entire kind was wiped out of existence. He said this with a lazy shrug, his hands folded behind his head. But if you had allowed just any ship to perch upon your waters and sail as they pleased with no danger, it would only be a matter of time before some other race set their gaze upon your waters and sought to infiltrate and possess them. In the end, it would be your own race that suffered. So, who could exactly say what is right or wrong? Ryuk mumbled under his breath. It indeed is complicated. King Oromunda's deep voice rumbled through the dark waters. But even through the complication, the rules of the world are simple, Ryuk, he said. The rules? Ryuk asked. Survive, King Oromunda replied. Simply survive. Nothing else matters but survival. When a man is faced with a choice between his life and another's, his instinct will always push him to save himself first. I believe that was what we Krakens did. But having spent a century here, my bloodlust has been worn out, and I've realized the error of my actions, he said, his tone quieter now. You know, it's almost angelic in its own way, Ryuk suddenly said as King Oromunda turned to him. Angelic? How? He asked. You abyssal krakens are the ones responsible for creating the protective halo that kept our race from being invaded by others, or from having our own slaughtered. Yet, at the same time, you are now also paying the karma that should have followed every kraken for the destruction you sowed to protect them. You created the fear, and now you also bear the karma of it. The sacrifice seems almost angelic, doesn't it? Ryuk said, as King Amounda's eyes glinted with light. But as much as I say that, I also do not wish to side with evil. Ryuk mused under his breath, and boisterous laughter erupted from King Oromunda. Believe it or not, Ryuk, the truth of reality is bitter. Sooner or later, you'll face it, and when you do, you'll either crumble under it or accept it with pride and survive. I don't know, he muttered doubtfully. The silence reigned supreme for a whole before the word broke through. Races invade other races, destroy other races, in an eternal battle for resources and power. Ryuk said, calling out, Tell me, King Oromunda, could this ever come to an end? Come to an end? King Oromunda repeated. Could there ever be a world where every race coexists? Where there are no krakens, no angels, no dragons, no nulls, just people? A peaceful world, so to say. I understand how you feel, King Oromunda said. The desire for peace is something that finds its way to men who have seen enough war. Imagine if it all came to an end, Ryuk, King Oromunda said, looking out to sea. Imagine if there were no war. Imagine if an ant could ride upon the back of a lion without being crushed. Incredulous, doesn't it seem? He said, turning back to Ryuk. If the world could end, I think that would be the most fitting death for it, Ryuk replied, and King Oromunda hummed deeply. It's a beautiful fantasy, he said, and Ryuk paused before chuckling to himself. A fantasy, huh? I'm sorry to burst the bubble, King Oromunda said. Races coexist? So far, such things as respect, honor, pride, and all that make a being exist. Then there would never be peace. Look at me, for example, he said as Ryuk turned to him. When I dragged down ships and destroyed them all amidst the screams, I never realized the error of my ways. I considered myself a guardian, believing I was doing this to secure the future of my own race. Yet, when my race decided to lock me away, I didn't just give up. I fought back, a brutal battle, killing so many of my own race that I thought I was guarding. So much so that their corpses formed a wall, he said, and Ryuk's heart shook. It has taken me 100 years in this abyss before I slowly began to realize my errors. But I am just a typical story. When things such as pride and ego are concerned, races will slaughter even their own to save face, never realizing the error of their ways until it's too late. If even races that have the same blood flowing through them could not coexist, how could you bring together the hundreds of thousands of races around the universe as one? He asked Ryuk, who didn't have an answer for it at all. In fact, right now, he was in a war with his own race, the Nulls, as much as he wanted to deny them. Wasn't it ironic for someone like him to be wishing for peace? It's truly ridiculous, he mused under his breath. But there's one thing unique, though. Something that could potentially work. King Oromunda suddenly said, as Ryuk turned to the crimson-eyed being with a raised brow. There is. Yes, I will use Thaith Vorgoth as an example, he said, as Ryuk's brows creased slightly. The Nulls are all called Nulls, but truly, they're just like any other race with their own clans. I think there are about 3 different categories of Nulls, wholly different from each other. That was something even Ryuk wasn't aware of. Before Thaith Vorgoth, the 3 races of the Nulls used to be embroiled with each other. A war for supremacy, for a race that could be crowned as the true king of Nulls. That war weakened them, and the Nulls weren't really that powerful of an evil race. They held great potential, but they divided like any other race. Something changed that. The birth of the Null of Carnage. You might rebel against your Thaith Vorgoth and not view him as a great figure like all do, and I think I have an idea why that is, but Thaith Vorgoth really is on a level of his own, King Oromunda said. He possesses so much power and potential, and both of these things were so great that the Nulls eventually began to idolize him. They saw him as a divine hellish king, and even the most powerful Nulls considered him a divine hero. Normally, Null himself, the manifestation of the Null bloodline, used to rule the Nulls, but he wasn't much respected because, in a way, he only exists due to the Null's presence. He never stopped the skirmishes, but Thaith Vorgoth did. With the admiration the Nulls possessed for him, when he asked for the war between the 3 races to be dropped, they all dropped their weapons and swore loyalty to him. This was how the Nulls became greater, and eventually, one of the most renowned evil conqueror races in the universe. It all began with Thaith Vorgoth. My point is, the world can indeed unite if there's one whose words weigh so heavily, whose presence is so admired that every being would be willing to put aside their difference and pride from a word of his. A hero, so to say, he said, and Ryuk hummed. But you see, even heroes fall just as Thaith Vorgoth had fallen. And when the hero falls, everything returns to what it once was. Now the Nulls, though stronger due to the worlds that Thaith Vorgoth had helped conquer, are still divided. Their hero has been imprisoned and became the most hated of the Nulls for betraying them. In the end, reality won again. Peace is a beautiful fantasy, and only survival matters. King Oromunda mused quietly, as silence embroiled the dark waters. Ryuk became lost in thought, the entire conversation repeating itself. To unite the world and achieve peace, one needed to be a hero, to possess the admiration of the world so deeply that they would put aside what makes them beings to fulfill the hero's words. But even the mightiest hero, in one way or another, will eventually fall. And when that happens, reality simply resets back to what it once was, showing its absolute dominance. It's almost like an amusing game, isn't it? Ryuk mused beneath his breath, and King Oromunda completed. It is. Almost like there's an entity that has created above us these rules of reality, but leaves slight loopholes within to give us hope. There are times when we believe we can go against the norms, having found these loopholes, only to reach the end and find out we're still stuck in the game. He said, and it was exactly what Ryuk felt. Who was the one who created this rule of survival? Who planted these attributes of pride, honor, and ego in every being? Who revealed to them that the only way to win was to invade others and take away their resources for themselves? If one argued that destruction was simply in the nature of some beings, then who was responsible for planting that nature in the first place? It almost felt as though someone sat above reality, moving everything according to a grand design, casting beings into hope only to crush them, lifting them to the heights of power and respect, only to drag them down into the depths of despair. Or maybe I'm just thinking too far. For how long did you think you deserved to remain here? Ryuk asked, looking at the pair of crimson eyes that silently stared at him before replying. Probably until the Croconoid Kingdom faces another threat and has to run to us, I guess, he said with a boisterous laugh. You're not mad that I didn't release you? Ryuk asked, a rumble echoing through the waters. Speaking to you has made me come to terms with my own errors. Evil cannot truly be excused, so I will remain here, hoping the longer I stay, the more my sins are washed away. I'm grateful to you for helping me come to terms with that, if anything, he said. And now, Ryuk could see King Oromunda had really calmed down. While the suffocating evil aura still rippled off of him, the anger in his voice had considerably lessened, and now he had even chosen to remain here of his own accord. It was an obvious change compared to when Ryuk had first stepped among them. For that reason, Ryuk sat once more, his form changing into his sleeker dragon form. His hands reached to the side. King Oromunda watched as a pink light suddenly coalesced around his palms. Ryuk's fingers folded upon the pink light, and in the next moment, a purple rune trailed over his draconic scales, while his snow-white hair instantly became fully replaced by a pink color. When the light dimmed, all that stood before King Oromunda was a being with pink hair, skin covered in pink runes, and holding onto a musical instrument. It was a violin, covered in the same pink aura, and King Oromunda's heart skipped at the aura from it. A god relic? He muttered to himself in shock. The violin moved to Ryuk's shoulder, along with its bow. Silently, his eyes closed, the runic purple in his hands flaring up. In the next instant, he felt his own senses dull as his hands moved on their own. When the bow struck the strings, a purple ripple of energy flowed forward from Ryuk, carrying an incredulous melody. King Oromunda observed silently as the violin played, and in the next moment, he began noticing changes. It was said that if one stayed amidst destruction long enough, soon they would begin to reek of blood and death. The abyssal krakens had done enough evil in the name of justice for their kind, and naturally, they rippled with that same evil aura. Yet, when the pink ripple trailed over the skin of the thousands of krakens around, King Oromunda saw the pitch-black ashy strand of death around them lifting away. The black ash that had covered their tentacles began to fade, revealing the skin beneath. It was dark, but it was an alluring darkness. A black covered in carefully drawn strands of crimson runic lines. A purification. They were the last words King Oromunda said before he felt himself sinking into the peace of the melody. It was a simple piece with a simple wish to make him dream. And he dreamed, not of pain or the screams of those he had drowned mercilessly, but a dream. A beautiful dream that could never have been farther away from a nightmare. Ryuk's playing of the violin was beyond his conscious control, but the violin played his heart. The abyssal krakens deserved their imprisonment. They were not innocent. But in this world, the term itself was tricky in such a world. Now, Ryuk knew that the abyssal krakens had come to realize their errors. He believed they deserved a chance. And that was why he had played to give them a second chance, and that was what the violin did. It tore away the ash that had obscured their true forms through ages of evil and destruction, revealing what lay beyond. The darkness was washed away, and the evil aura banished. But the ripple continued, far out from the abyss, rippling through the waters. Soon enough, it found its way to the walls of bones. When it touched them, the formation immediately flared up, protecting the walls. Yet as the melody continued and the ripples wandered around it, the formation began to dim, and soon, it dispersed. The ripple of pink struck the bones of the walls, absorbed by them, and in the next moment, light began to coalesce. Lights that formed krakens, but not fully. They looked like manifestations of them, not possessing physical bodies, but spirit-like figures. One by one, these spirits rose from the bones in the wall and swam forward, toward the source of the melody. The more they rose, the more the wall of bones began to disappear, and silently, it faded away, never to exist again. The water that flowed out from the other side of the wall was no longer cold. It was warm, filled with purifying strands of pink. And the scene of the wall's breakdown was felt by the strongest of the krakens, as auras burst through the waters, and hundreds of gazes turned toward the ripple. They finally forced their way through the walls? The play continued, and even Ryuk was drowned within it. The feeling of peace that followed, in a way, made him free. The heaviness and the tension left, And when he opened his eyes, the peace had ended. The Krakens were in slumber, but now their forms had completely changed. The stench of evil and destruction they once had was no more. Instead, a somewhat noble aura surrounded them. Their tentacles had shifted from the dirty ash color to a gem-like black, with runes upon their skin occasionally gleaming with crimson lights that trailed across their forms. Fearsome they still were, yet regal they had become. But then he noticed different presences and he turned his head up, his eyes widening in surprise. He found them, the spiritual manifestations of about 1,000 Krakens hanging around. This, he muttered at the bizarre sight, only for the words to echo from behind. They are our own, the ones who died by our hands.